Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars. Topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
What's going on, guys? You're listening to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Casey Foreman, and I got a very interesting show for you guys today, talking about all the different aspects of the NBA and what's going on in the world of the NBA. I'm going to start out by talking about, the biggest question hanging over this season and, the resumption of play in Orlando. Does this season deserve an asterisk by it? I also want to talk about, Victor Olidipo, how he has decided to opt out of play in Orlando. I also want to talk about the possible 8-team bubble tournament that could go on in Chicago. Don't have too many details regarding that topic, but it's a very interesting thing that could happen. I kind of want to speculate and talk about all the details we do know about it. And then make sure you stick around to the very end of the show because it's actually been, believe it or not, 4 years since Kevin Durant decided to leave Oklahoma City and the Thunder for Golden State and the Warriors. So I want to break down the move. Talk about what it's done for the NBA, what it did for Kevin's career, all different aspects of that. So stick around to the very end of the show. But like I said, I want to talk about the biggest question right now over this NBA season, and that has got to be, does it deserve an asterisk next to it? And if you aren't, familiar with what I'm talking about, the sixth edge star looking thing. I'll give you the definition of it. It's used to note an absence of information. So usually, I'll give you a perfect example of when an asterisk should be used. This past season with the MLB, the Astros winning, the World Series. However, we later come to find out they cheated to win the World Series, somewhat making it a faulty championship, definitely making it a faulty championship. Thus, in my opinion, there should be an asterisk next to that season in the MLB rule book saying, that there is an absence of information when you see the champion because that team did in fact cheat to get there. So that is when an asterisk should be used, in my opinion, showing one team or one organization having an unfair advantage. That usually, it's in a negative sense. The definition simply says used to note an absence of information, but still, usually when an asterisk is there, it's in the negative sense. We're taking something away from that champion, from that season. So does this season even matter? If there is going to be an asterisk next to it, calling it the Corona season, is this a faulty season? Does this season even matter? What's the point of even going back to play in Orlando if there is an asterisk next to it? So let's talk about it. Let's talk about if there should be one. I want to kind of start by talking about some past seasons and some things or some prior seasons that, if there should be an asterisk next to any season in NBA history, why aren't there next to these? So I want to talk about some prior seasons in the debate for the asterisk. But yeah, we've heard people like Shaq, other high-named NBA profiles come out and say, of course this season is going to have an asterisk. We had the stop of play, won't play an entire season. have to go play in the bubble in Orlando? Of course there is. Yes, there is additional information needed when talking about this season. You will have to go out and say, yes, there was a pandemic that broke out at the end of the season, thus making the season stop, making us forcing the season to resume the play, start this play again months down the road. So yes, there's nothing you could do. Health pandemic, back against the wall, had to postpone the season. You're going to have to bring that up when you talk about the 2019-2020 NBA season. Yes, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. But high profile names, bunch of people in the NBA, this has got to be, one of the hottest topics right now. And it deserves to be so. It's, why even play if it's a faulty season, But like I said, let's go back into prior seasons in the NBA, and other seasons that could possibly have an asterisk next to it. However, we don't necessarily see that when we look in the record books. The first one to come to mind has got to be the 2011-2012 season, the lockout season, as you will. Only 66 games. The NBA season didn't even start, until December 25th. So with all the worrying about next season not even starting until, December, Christmas time, don't worry. Remember the 2011-2012 season, the season didn't even begin until Christmas, so the time we're planning on having next season. So don't worry about next season, it should be fine. The 2011-2012 season didn't start until Christmas. The whole reason for the lockout was, the player and owner agreement ran out, thus needing a new one, the old one being a little bit outdated for the NBA, all the profits coming in, what the players meant to the league. It was right after, LeBron James went to Miami. So, yes, the league was definitely needing a new player owner agreement, a new CBA, which is the reason for that lockout, and the reason the postponed of play was until December 25th. But the CBA was agreed to by the players and the owners, almost given it. It's not quite that, but almost like a 50-50 split for revenue. Like I said, definitely needed that back then, and a smart move. But yeah, didn't work out. It wasn't a pandemic, it was simply negotiations that pushed this one back. Derrick Rose, we then see him go on to win, be the youngest MVP ever, the youngest player ever to win the MVP season down in Chicago. Props to him. We don't see anybody knocking Derrick for winning the MVP in a shortened season of only 66 games instead of the usual 82 games. So he won only in 66 instead of the 82. However, when we talk about Derrick Rose winning that MVP award, we never think about the shortened season, the lockout. We just think about him being so young, the intense and amazing season he in fact did have, and we don't hear anybody knocking or bringing up, only playing a 66-game season, not playing an entire season, yet he has that MVP trophy, not having an asterisk next to it. When you look at the all-time awards, all-time winners of that award, you don't see an asterisk next to Derrick Rose in his name. Also that year, we see LeBron James and the Miami Heat overcome the loss to the Dallas Mavericks. They go on to win the NBA Finals. LeBron wins the Finals MVP. LeBron obviously gets his first championship, solidifying him as one of the all-time greats. And, like I said, when we look all-time, look at that championship, do we knock LeBron for that championship? Do we knock the Oklahoma City Thunder? If they would have won the championship, would we have knocked them? No. We simply think about LeBron getting that first chip, well-deserved, him saying it's about damn time. That's the first thing I think of when I think of him winning the championship, coming off the somewhat embarrassing loss to the Dallas Mavericks the year before. So that's what I think about. I don't think of the shortened season. Again, that, when you look at that season, do you need to know that there was a shortened play? There was a shortened season. Does there need to be an asterisk there? Because, there is an absence of information when you look at that season. They did not, in fact, play an entire season. So, Are we knocking that championship? Are we knocking that MVP award? In my mind, I am not in any way. So no, I'm not putting an asterisk next to that season. I don't take anything away from that season. I don't think any team had an advantage that any other team didn't. We actually saw Derrick Rose and the Bulls having a better record than the Miami Heat that season. So no, I don't believe there needs to be an asterisk next to it. Very deserving of an MVP. Derrick Rose was very deserving of a championship. LeBron and the Miami Heat were. Another season that people talk about maybe deserving an asterisk, that 1998-99 season, only a 50-game season, also a lockout, but we didn't see them playing in, September, October, November, December, January. We had to wait until February. I'm sorry, I was actually born around then, so I don't want to say we. I wasn't watching the NBA back then. However, everybody who had to wait until February. They didn't get play in, like I said, in October, like we're used to, and let alone December, the very latest we're used to seeing the NBA. So they had to wait until February. Okay, February, for the regular season to start. Only played 50 games that year. The Spurs led the entire league in 37 wins. Again, the first seed in the Western Conference won 37 games, only playing 50 games that season. Duncan and Popovich go on to win their first championship. It's the first season without MJ in the league. But we don't necessarily knock, Duncan and Popovich for that first championship. We give them all the championships they won. We don't knock them for any of them. If obviously if there was one to knock, it would be this one. Michael had just left the East, leaving it somewhat in shambles as well. There wasn't really a clear favorite in the Eastern Conference after that Bull team left. So not a huge rival they would have had to face in the East, coming out of the East no matter what, but a definite champion in the Spurs, starting that Spurs dynasty, starting the Tim Duncan era, the Greg Popovich era, starting that undefeated trip to the playoff. We saw him in the entire 2010s, except this year probably, making it to the NBA playoffs. So it started back then, the dynasty and the role and the rule of Popovich and Duncan, started that 1998-99 season, and no one necessarily knocks them for only playing 50 games, only winning 37 games, and winning a championship. So no one necessarily knocks them for that. And if you were going to put an asterisk next to any season, I do think that season would probably be the one. Again, only winning 37 games, only playing 50 games, and in total only playing 67 games, one game prior than that 2011-2012 lockout regular season. They only played 67 games in total. So if there would be a season that needed one, I think that would be the one. However, we don't see it next to it in the all-time record books. We don't see the asterisk next to that championship and that finals MVP. So I don't necessarily see there being one on this season. Again, last year, if you want a really recent example, in the finals last year, I don't necessarily think that there should be one because it happens all the time in the finals. Think about LeBron's first time against the Warriors, his depleted roster with all the injuries they suffered. So, maybe we don't see Golden State getting the championship if Cleveland doesn't have all the injuries that they do. But, the 2019 finals, Kevin Durant only plays one quarter in the entire 6 games of the finals. Kevin Durant plays one quarter. Clay doesn't play in Game 3 at all. He's in and out of several games and tears the ACL in Game 6. Players like Andre Iguodala, Kevon Looney, key players for the rotation, in and out, mainly missing most of that series. It was mainly Steph Curry against the Toronto Raptors, led by Kawhi Leonard. So if you watch those finals, you knew every time Steph got that ball, he was getting double teamed, if not triple teamed, making the Warriors have another option, which they really did not have. So if you want to put an asterisk next to any also finals, last year's is the one to do it. The Raptors played a depleted Golden State roster, which I don't think is debate that, if that Golden State team is in full health, that Warriors team wins 3 in a row in maybe 5 or 6 games. Maybe it goes 6 because that Raptor team was playing some phenomenal basketball. But, Kevin Durant came out to say himself, if he's healthy, they win in 5, maybe 6 on his show with Serge Ibaka. So I agree with Kevin in that stance. I think they win in an easy fashion if they are, in fact, healthy. However, we see, the Warriors go down with injuries. The Raptors take advantage of that, win an NBA championship. So there's no knock on them for winning that championship. There is a need. There is an absence of information when you look at that championship, all the players that were hurt. However, we don't see an asterisk next to it. Now let's talk about this season. So this season, they're going to end up playing over 70 games in the regular season, well over that with the playoffs. So more games than that 1998 season already they're going to be playing with the 8 seeding games. And impossible, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but with all the games that they're playing, yes, more than 70 games will have played in the regular season. Players, yes, would have taken 4 months off in prime time, in the prime time of the season, the big money portion of the season after the All-Star break. You're really trying to get the team chemistry together, starting to make that playoff push. If some of the teams that are in final contention are getting in that form, getting in final form, and your lineups are getting in their final form. All the things are setting in stone. You're coming into play. All things should be working out well at this point in the season for you. And if things aren't, you probably aren't going to be looking too good. Your shots aren't looking too good to win the championship. So key time in the season. But then we see, the pandemic break out. The season has to stop. We get a 4-month layoff, a 4-month break in the season. So that's another thing. All players, however, are going to have to go through the same thing. One team isn't getting favored in comparison to another. All teams, all players are going through this 4-month hiatus. We also have everything that's going on in the civil rights movement that's going right now. So players are all going through the exact same thing, pandemic-wise, civil rights-wise, or movement-wise, and everyone's going through the same thing. Everyone's seeing the same thing, living the same thing right now, So no team necessarily has an advantage there. All the teams that we're going to be getting the best teams possible for the NBA playoffs. So when people say they're worried about the play in the playoffs, how it's going to be, yes, people haven't played in months. However, they're starting training camps next week. They're going to start to get in basketball form. They're going down to Orlando, I believe, on Thursday. So yes, they're going to start to get back in basketball form. And like I said, we're going to have the best possible teams in the playoffs because of the seeding games and because of the possible play-in tournament for that 8th spot. The seeding games, 8 seeding games, are going to put teams like the Pelicans, Trailblazers, Grizzlies trying to get that 8th spot. You heard me last week talking about it. We're going to get the best team possible in that 8th spot. And then if not, we're also going to get the possible play-in tournament. So that is going to make sure we get the best possible play in the NBA. Otherwise, obviously we don't have the 1 through 16 playoff seeding because that's the best possible. But we're getting the best possible that we're being given to. We're getting the best possible play, our best teams in the playoffs because of the seeding games and the play-in tournament. There's also no home court advantage this year. It's a neutral playing ground. Everybody is in Orlando, is in one place, staying in their hotels, a neutral site. Everyone's experiencing the same thing. No one's getting to go home and come back or have a home game, or everyone's playing in the same circumstances. Again, no home court advantage. That's huge for teams very like young teams like Boston, the Pelicans, the Grizzlies, the Nuggets, teams that thrive on their home court advantage. Young teams usually do, like the Philadelphia Sixers as well. They're not having the cushion of playing at home. Everyone's playing at the same place, same time. No fans, going to be quiet. Best play is going to win. So, it's, in my opinion, we're going to be seeing some of the best play. It's going to be pickup basketball almost. It's going to be grit, grindy. Players are going to be kind of like the AAU days, just off talent. The other circumstances like home court advantage and stuff isn't going to necessarily matter. So if you want to put an asterisk next to it, because of the intensity, the difficulty to win the championship, I agree with it in that stance. But usually the asterisk is used to knock the champion, to knock the MVP, to knock the winners of those awards that season. So I don't think it should be used in that sense. If we're using it in a sense that, this is a very difficult championship, I'm all for it there. But like I said, usually it's being used in a negative way. And if it is going to be used in a negative way, I am against the use of the asterisk. Everyone is going through the exact same thing. There isn't a clear favorite coming out of this. Maybe there are. We know, like I said, a couple of teams who are in contention, but, one team isn't getting more time to rest than another is. One team isn't getting more time to prepare than another team is. So all teams are on a neutral playing ground, no home court advantage in Orlando. It's something we've never have seen before, yes, but it's something all players are going through together. It's all equal, no asterisk, in my opinion. I cannot wait until July 30th so we can get some actual games to talk about. I'm sure everyone else is. I'm going to put a poll up on Twitter. Let me know in the comments section. If you are listening on a platform that's able to leave comments, leave a comment for me. Let me know what you guys think about today's podcast and what you guys think about this NBA season, and if it does deserve an asterisk next to it. Go check out my poll on Twitter. That's going to be airing on Monday. But I'm going to go ahead and take a quick break. When I come back, I want to talk about Victor Olidipo. He has opted out of Orlando. I want to talk about his decision and a couple of other aspects to him opting out. So don't go anywhere. I'm going to be right back.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, guys, welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. I'm still Casey Foreman. Like I said before the break, I want to talk about Victor Olidipo and his decision to opt out of play in Orlando. He has decided to not join the Indiana Pacers and their run in their 8 seeding games and their, in my opinion, their probable small playoff push. So he decided to not join the Pacers. I want to talk about it because, in my opinion, he is the biggest name so far. He's the biggest player, the biggest star to come out and say he is not going down to Orlando. I know we've heard KD, we've heard Kyrie come out and say they can't go down or they aren't going down, but they're not playing this year. And as far as guys going down to play, guys who would have went and actually played in Orlando, he has got to be the biggest name to sit out, and he is obviously the biggest name in that Indiana franchise, to that Pacer team. They go as far as Victor Oladipo will take them. And like I said, it's a smart move for Victor to sit out. Actually, I don't know if I've said that yet, but it's a smart move. Either way, it's a smart move for him to do so, mainly because of the injury he is coming off. If you don't remember, around the middle to end of the 2019 NBA regular season, Victor suffered a ruptured quad tendon in his right knee, and it was, I believe, in January or February this happened, and he's been out since then. He sat out the rest of the 2019 season. He then missed basically the entire season this year, played a handful of games before the season obviously had its abrupt stop. But did not play very much this season, and when he did play this season, he did not exactly play very well. He didn't play up to the performance, did not play the same way he was playing before the injury occurred. And when I see that, when I see a player coming back off a big injury, not quite up to the level he was playing at, the first thing I think of is he 100% healthy? Has he jumped back into it a little bit early? Because as we know, in that Eastern Conference, it's wide open right now. And if Victor Olidipo and that Pacer team, what they did multiple years ago to that LeBron and Cleveland Cavalier team, I think they are very capable at full strength of playing very good basketball against a lot of teams in the NBA. So I want to get that out there. But again, when he came back this year, did not play very well. Only averaged about 13 points, 3 assists, 3 rebounds. And as far as shooting percentage, not a guy known for shooting a very high clip. But either way, what he did this season in the short stint he did have, a little disappointing, only shooting 39% from the floor. So looking at what he did prior, him only averaging 13 points this year, only 3 rebounds, 3 assists, and only 39 from the floor. Looking at what he did years prior is making me think, he is not 100% healthy quite yet, needs time to rehab and focus on, his body, that tendon, making sure he can explode and, go to the basket at 100%, because his game is very intense, similar to Russell Westbrook, but can shoot a whole lot better. Half of his game is exploding to the basket, getting past his defender and making a play at the rim. So that's half of his game. He can rely on his outside jump shooting, but as we saw, him only relying on that only gets him 13, 14 points a game. When he's attacking the rim and shooting, we see him like we saw him in the 2017-2018 season, averaging 23 points, 4.5 assists, 5 rebounds, and a whopping 2 steals a game. So he was doing it on the offensive and defensive side. And obviously that season, 2017-2018, we saw him and the Indiana Pacers take LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers 7 games in the first round of the Eastern Conference playoffs, in the first round in the East. And like I said, push LeBron to that Game 7, we know Game 7 can go either way, but when a guy like LeBron is in the conversation, when you have one game with him, you got to put all the eggs in his basket. It's hard to bet against him in a Game 7. He did what he had to do, beat up on the young Victor Oladipo and the Indiana Pacers, which is what we expected them to do, but the fact that he took that team and that player 7 games, push them to the very max, is a true testament to what he is, what that Pacer team can do at full strength. But either way, this year, Victor not being quite 100%, in my opinion, the Pacers aren't quite in a place to win the East this year or to make a very big push. They've had injuries to their star players like Brogdon as well as Olidipo. I believe Turner has been in and out, Sabonis. So players have been in and out. So this year, either way, is not the year, but we know the East is as wide open as ever. So I understand the push to come back this season. Earlier I understand why he did come back. If he did come back and play, I do understand why he would have. But I'm all on the side of him not playing. Really excited. He decided to sit out and focus on rehabbing that injury, getting back to 100%, because there are more aspects to think of. It's not just the Pacer team, when you're thinking about Oladipo, him coming back. It's not just the team you have to think of. You've got to think about him and his career, what's best for him. So before we talk about that, let's talk about, that Pacer team, because at full strength, like I said, I think they are a little dangerous, kind of a sleeper team, a team you don't want to really sleep on. And let's talk about some of their players. So Domantas, I think that's how you say his name. I might be butchering that. Sabonis, this year alone, averaging 18 points, 12 rebounds, a block a game. So he's playing very well offensively and defensively. Kind of an undersized center. Like a 6'10" center, so somewhat of an undersized, outside shooting, spread the floor kind of big man. Either way, he's thrived in Indiana. 18 points, 12 rebounds. They also have a guy in TJ Warren, a young up-and-coming guy, also averaging 18.5 points this season. A decent versatile defender. We saw him get mixed up with Jimmy Butler this season, so a feisty guy, a guy not necessarily afraid of anybody in the league. So a great guy to have on that grit and grind Indiana roster. Like I said, averaging 18 points. Also an established point guard, rookie of the year in Malcolm Brogdon, a Virginia guy. I love that man. The fact they couldn't get it done. He couldn't win a championship at Virginia, a little disappointing. But, we see him thriving in the NBA. A little surprising, not necessarily a guy a lot of people saw popping so early. But either way, he's popped. He's playing very well this season. Highlight for the Indiana roster, averaging 16 points, 7 assists. So he's establishing himself. He's also establishing himself as a defensive point guard. So coming from Virginia, a very defensive-minded team. He can do it on both sides of the court. They have an established point guard in Malcolm Brogdon. I love that guy. So they have a very good roster. Then when you just add an all-star in Victor Oladipo, somewhat putting all those pieces together, the ceiling for this team is pretty high. I could very well see them in the coming years making it to the Western Conference Finals, depending on the seeding. A team you shouldn't underestimate by any means. Not necessarily a team I see, in final contention. We'll see what they can do. But let's get back to Victor, him sitting out, and it being the correct move for his career. Because, it's not, like I said, it's not just about that Indiana team hoping, looking to win a championship. It's for what's best for Victor in the long run in his career. So I don't know if people know this, but next year and in 2021, he will be a free agent, okay? And I think that is why we see him sitting out this year. He needs to get 100% healthy. Obviously he's chasing that payday, very well deserving of a payday, establishing himself as a all-star shooting guard, definitely an all-star in the Eastern Conference. And there are rumors going out there that teams like the Knicks, of course the Knicks, they're rumored to want everybody. Before they obviously wanted to draft Zion. They wanted to get KD and Kyrie. They wanted Anthony Davis. They wanted, blah, 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 blah. If they wanted KD, in his first go-abouts when he was leaving, OKC, which I'm going to talk about at the very end of the show. But either way, teams like the Knicks, the Spurs are rumored to want to make a push at Victor Oladipo. I would love to see him paired with a guy like Giannis Antetokounmpo. In my opinion, he could be a certified number 2 on a championship winning team. You pair him, an outside shooting guy who can do it on offense and defense, not scared of the big moment. I would love to see him paired up with a guy like Giannis in Milwaukee even. But, with the way their salary cap and where it is divvied on all their players, I don't think they have the room to make the big splash signing unless they can make a trade for Middleton. Either way, I'd love to see him with a guy like Giannis because he can be a number 2 in my opinion. Either way, teams like the Spurs, the Knicks, high, I don't want to say high caliber teams, but teams who could probably pay him the most or a large amount. Obviously, staying with Indiana, usually you get the most from the team you're already with. But the Spurs and the Knicks, both suitable places for him. Places obviously who could give him a payday. So I 100% support him sitting out in lieu of that free agency next year. You want to be 100% also with the team I just listed off and the players that Indiana team does have, the East being almost wide open next season, not so much with the return of KD and Kyrie and the Bucks getting older, maybe Bradley Beal and John Wall returning. Either way, the Pacers have players, and when you add a guy like Victor Oladipo at 100% to the guys they have already, that team can make a splash in the Eastern Conference. So I would love to see what they can do next year. If he's at 100%, he's making the correct decision in sitting out. I haven't seen any pushback on this, him coming back, not seeming to be at 100%. I think most people are on the boat that he should in fact sit out. So we're all happy for him. I, again, 100% support him. And, how much can I beat a dead horse? Good job, Victor Oladipo. I want to take a quick break. When I come back, I want to talk about a very interesting thing that could happen in the NBA. The possible bubble in Chicago for the 8 teams getting left out of that Orlando bubble. So don't go anywhere. I want to discuss that coming up next.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA, from the UFC to extreme cage fighting. They got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back, guys, to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. I am Casey Foreman. Like I said before the break, a very interesting, piece of news that came out recently. And, it's something I have been kind of hoping for, kind of waiting on hearing about. And Adrian Wojnarowski, he came out and tweeted, Woj, if he tweets it, if he says it, I am more than likely believing it, and almost, not quite, but I am almost going to take that to the bank every single time I hear that guy release something. So, Woj tweeted, he came out and said, it is possible, the 8 teams that were left out of Orlando are talking about not resuming their season, somewhat having a mini camp, a mini tournament, a summer league type tournament for their teams, since, the other teams in Orlando are getting a chance. So, I love the idea. It's giving the 8 teams, again, a chance to go and get into game play form again, a chance that they wouldn't necessarily get. So, let's talk about some of the details, the little bit of details we do know. So they would be more than likely in Chicago, Illinois. It'd be a bubble in Chicago, similar to what we see in Orlando. The players would go down there, have to stay down there the entire time. They're in play, in contention in the tournament. Not sure about, the people coming down. I'm guessing the guidelines will be very similar to the ones I explained weeks ago, the ones that the players are having in the resumption of play right now. So, I'm guessing it would be very similar, but, the biggest question is the NBA going to take it as seriously as the Orlando bubble? Can they make it as safe as that Orlando bubble is? Because, safety is the number one priority, and that has got to be the biggest question going in for all the teams. Are you going to put it on the same pedestal? Obviously not quite the same, effect, but, are you going to take it as seriously? Let's talk about the teams included. So the 8 teams that were left out are the Hornets, the Hawks, the Knicks, the Warriors, the Timberwolves, the Cavaliers, the Chicago Bulls, obviously, and then the Detroit Pistons. So those are the 8 teams who would go back and play. Not the most 8 interesting teams, but, with a world without sports right now, or a lot of sports, talking about basketball coming back in any fashion gets me excited. So no matter what team I'm watching, if I can watch it, more than likely I'm going to be watching it. So even if they are the 8 kind of 8 bad teams in the league, I'll come out and say it, 8 teams that obviously are not in the contention of making the playoffs are 6 or more games behind, or 7 or more games behind. Hornets, Hawks, Knicks, Warriors, Timberwolves, Cavaliers, Bulls, Pistons. So those are the 8 teams, 22 teams. The biggest reason we see this happening, I believe, is because of the 22 teams getting a chance to go back and play. Obviously, they I don't want to say they deserve more, but yes, this season, they deserve more. They deserve, because of their regular season play being in the playoff contention, playoff push, they deserve, to come back and play sooner than the 8 teams that did not make it. So I don't think there's any debate there. But that's the reason we see it happening. The 8 teams simply wanting to get back in basketball shape, not having necessarily the chances to, like the 22 teams are. But we see teams like, or the coaches like Steve Kerr. He came out and said, he wants the Warriors to have a mini camp type thing, to get the team together, get the guys playing together, get that team chemistry rolling for next season. I've talked about that already. I think it's very important for a team like the Warriors to get started as early as possible with the new pieces they've added, as well as, the veterans coming back from injuries. So it's very important for a team, yes, like the Golden State Warriors, to get back and play and get the ball rolling a little bit, But I think a lot of the teams will be down to play. I don't think a whole lot of pushback, but like I said, it has to revolve around safety. It has got to be, are you guys going to take this as seriously as you're taking those 22 playoff teams? If you can get the right precautions, the right guidelines, the right bubble in Chicago, a big city, so that can be a little scary, especially with the numbers going up around the U.S., with the pandemic and the virus, it can be a little scary. Of course, we don't really know what it's going to be like in September. We don't even know what it's going to be like in a month from now. So in a few months, we really don't know what it's going to be like. So that's another looming factor. Is it even going to be possible in September to do this? But again, I'm all for it. I want to see it. I want to see basketball, and as much basketball as possible, because it's said that it would happen in September, and the end of September would be the end of the NBA postseason. So with the postseason ending, maybe we get a little bit of summer league type play with these 8 teams. Maybe we see these guys go and play, and it picks up right after the finals. They put some games on TV, and I bet it gets some ratings. Obviously it's going to be no NBA playoffs, but still, I guarantee people will tune in. Guys like me, the people who are listening to this podcast right now, I bet a lot of you would be down to watch a lot of those games. So I'm all for it. I hope the league continues on with this plan. Again, Woj tweeted it. He's talking about it. And if he's talking about it in a positive sense, saying he thinks it will in fact get done, I'm on his boat. I'm following his train, and I'm thinking it's probably going to end up happening. Again, they just got to make sure it's safe. The players and teams have to be into it. They had a phone call last week. I think it was on July 2nd or 3rd. On all the 8 teams were involved in the phone call, besides one. And I think it's kind of funny. I kind of know, I understand why they weren't included on the phone call. But the only team not included would be the New York Knicks, actually. Kind of funny. They weren't included on the phone call. Again, I don't necessarily know why. Maybe because the league isn't a huge fan of the front office there. I'm not quite sure. But Knicks weren't invited on the phone call. The 7 other teams were. But again, 7 other teams were. And the biggest concern right now, or not the biggest concern, but the biggest setback would be some of the veteran players and the stars. Not too many of stars on those teams, but the ones that are on those teams, not a lot of them, or we may see a chunk of them sitting out, not necessarily participating in the games, in the tournament that we might see. Again, that's because they're probably going to be preparing for the next season. A team like the Warriors, maybe a team like the Pistons, not sure. They have the one star in Blake Griffin, which we saw he would probably sit out the games. Also a star in Steph Curry. We saw him coming back, so we also might see Steph sitting out, so that's another thing that might hurt the ratings. We might not see the players, the big names that we were hoping for in Chicago. But either way, it's giving these teams a chance to resume the play, get their legs back on, because like we see people talking about now, the biggest doubt or sorry, I shouldn't say the biggest, but one of the bigger doubts going in is, are these players going to be in basketball shape? Are they ready to play basketball? Because like we know, the only real way to be in basketball shape is by playing basketball, 5-on-5 basketball. That is mainly the biggest factor in getting yourself ready for high level play. Again, 5-on-5. And again, these 22 teams that made the playoffs are in playoff contention. Well deserving so, but they're getting a chance these other 8 teams aren't getting. These other 8 teams are simply wanting a chance to get their legs going, get ready for that 2020-2021 season, because that is the season in question right now. How is that season going to work? Starting in December, similar to the 2011-2012 lockout season. Free agency's moved. The draft has been moved, so it's all going to be new going forward, but still, if everything else is new, why not continue to add new things, add the Summer League type tournament in Chicago, let these teams get ready. Hopefully they can make it as safe as the bubble in Orlando. That's the biggest concern, obviously, but if they can, I'm all for it. Like I said, Woj tweeted about it, so I'm almost taking it to the bank. I'm like 75% sure, 75 to 80% sure that we're probably going to see that we're going to see these 8 teams playing in some sort of fashion, some tournament, Summer League style. Either way, like I said, Woj said it. I'm believing it. Not necessarily 100%, but 70-75% book it, But that's going to be it for this segment. I'm going to go ahead and take a quick break. But believe it or not, it has been 4 years. On July 4th, it was 4 years since Kevin Durant made the huge decision. Everyone has an opinion on this move, rightfully so, but he made his decision to leave Oklahoma City, the Thunder, for Golden State and the Warriors. So I want to talk about that move. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to be, again, right back.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
All right, guys, like I said before the break, it has been roughly 4 years Okay, 4 years since Kevin Durant made the huge decision. Everyone has an opinion on it or had an opinion on the move, but he made the huge move, the huge decision to leave the Oklahoma City Thunder for the Golden State Warriors. Before I talk about the move itself, what it did for Kevin, and just like I said, the move itself, I want to set the backstory for you guys a little bit. Talk about what happened before, okay? So, Kevin and the Oklahoma City Thunder match up with the Golden State Warriors in the Western Conference Finals. They go up 3-1, 3 games to 1 on the Golden State Warriors. Steph, Clay, Draymond, they make the huge comeback in large part to Clay, his nuclear Game 6, which some people think of, one of the best games when you think about games of the decade, that's one of the games people talk about, Clay Game 6 in Oklahoma City. So Steph, Clay, Draymond, they make the huge comeback, down 3-1. They beat the Oklahoma City Thunder in 7 games. Steph and the Warriors then go on to their second finals in a row. They go up 3-1 on the Cleveland Cavaliers. What Kevin did to him, he then, has happened to him by LeBron. Steph and the Warriors go up 3-1 on the Cleveland Cavaliers, then blow, the infamous 3-1 lead. LeBron James, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Love make the huge comeback on the Warriors, the 73-win Warriors, let alone. So the Warriors then blow the lead to the Cavaliers. They lose to the Cavs in the finals. LeBron gets his 3rd championship, brings the championship home for Cleveland. The huge triumph, the one of the best storylines out there. But let's talk about, the effect that had on the NBA. Okay, LeBron wins the championship. That had an effect. He comes back 3-1. That had to do with the Kevin Durant move. Okay, the Warriors then call Kevin Durant. We can't really beat this guy. We're not too confident, in beating this guy in LeBron James. We were just up 3-1 on him. He then comes back and beats us in dominant fashion in those last 3 games. And they're embarrassed. They're needing some ammunition, some help to put in their back pocket for next year. So, what, LeBron, you got last year. We're going to add this 7-foot monster and show you, cool, you got your 1 championship. We're going to go get 2 more with this guy. Or many more with this guy, so they think. So yeah, they lose to LeBron and the Cavs. They then call up the best free agent on the market, one of the best players in the NBA in general, and Kevin Durant. Kevin takes the interview with the Golden State Warriors. He also talks, with the Los Angeles Clippers, the Boston Celtics, the San Antonio Spurs. Heck, the Knicks were even in discussion because of Carmelo. That really fell through quickly. The Lakers didn't get the opportunity of an interview that they wanted. So the main teams, Clippers, Boston, Warriors, and Spurs, then obviously OKC were like the 5 big teams he was really deciding from. He goes through, I'll talk about the choices, the other options in a minute, but, he ends up choosing the 73 win Golden State Warriors, in large part because of their game plan, their style of play, the unselfish, style of play that, Steve Kerr brought into that group. The game plan, obviously, he said had a huge part to do with him going in. He was kind of tired of the ball-centric game plan they had in Oklahoma City Thunder. He went ISO, Russ would go ISO. They kind of just took their turns. KD was tired of that. He saw himself, I don't necessarily have the best chance of winning with this game plan, with this roster. So he makes the move. He joins Steph, the 2-time MVP, the finals winner, obviously 1 championship under his belt at the time. Klay Thompson, the best catch and shoot shooter. The Steph and Klay. They back then, they were pretty much established. Not all the way. but pretty much established as, one of the best, if not the best, backcourt of all time. And he then knowingly joins the best backcourt of all time, a grit and grind guy in Draymond Green. They have the sixth man in Andre Iguodala. They have the head coach in Steve Kerr. So all the pieces line up. They have the game plan that you're wanting to go play for. The off ball, the ball movement, unselfish style of play Kevin said he was looking for. So the Golden State literally checks off all the boxes. The only negative is they just beat you in the Western Conference Finals. You really just blew a 3-1 lead to this team, and then you go and join the team. Yes, I understand the knock on him joining Golden State. However, it's very similar in my eyes to LeBron James and his move to Miami. Yes, Miami was not coming off 2 finals appearances. They didn't have necessarily a two-time MVP, the best backcourt of all time, and an established coach in Steve Kerr. And let alone the huge established roster yet. No, Miami did not yet have those things. But LeBron did join a Miami team who did have a Dwayne Wade. They were in playoff contention every year. He did win a championship years prior with Shaq, so he was a finals MVP. So Dwayne Wade, yes, was an established all-star, an established guard in the NBA, a finals winner. He also joins an established all-star in Chris Bosh. So I think the move LeBron to Miami, very similar to Kevin Durant's move to Golden State, kind of one-ups him in a way. Joins a little bit of a better team, obviously, or a whole lot of a better team, but still, I see it very similar to LeBron moving to Miami, so I didn't see a huge flaw. I didn't I didn't have a problem with LeBron going to Miami, so I really didn't have a problem with Kevin going to Golden State. Yes, it swung the momentum, the pendulum in their favor. On the Golden State, we knew they were going to be, at the very least, in the Western Conference Finals, if not the finals, yes. But I don't see the huge sellout knocking him, saying he's no longer an all-time great. No, you can keep that. I don't agree with that. I don't think it had a huge knock on his legacy. If anything, I think it propelled his legacy. He gets 2 championships, 2 finals MVPs. He averages 26 points in 3 years. His defensive game grows. He becomes a better teammate. So I think going to the Warriors only helped Kevin and his all-time status. Yes, it had the controversial move at the beginning. So did LeBron James to Miami. We don't necessarily talk about that anymore. And now with Kevin in Golden State, that wasn't even the biggest narrative. They proved pretty much at the end that they did in fact need him to win a championship. He goes down. They are not the same team since they have Kevin. They don't have the same roster and depth they did, but either way, he goes down. Steph and Clay, or Steph alone, it's clear he cannot win the championship by himself. So if Kevin did in fact come back in those finals to win an MVP, to win the finals, that narrative goes away that they don't need him. They do in fact need him, and it is proven in that finals last year. I think it was proven in the finals that he was the guy on that team. They needed him to be, the all-time great team that they were. He put them above the rest in contention, and I think it propelled his all-time status more than it hurt going to Golden State. And as far as the other options go, the other biggest option, or 2 biggest options in my eyes, were the Los Angeles Clippers and the San Antonio Spurs. Let's talk about those 2 teams real quick. So the Clippers, if he would have joined that team, let's talk about what that would have looked like, okay? He would have joined Blake Griffin at that point, averaging 21 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists. Chris Paul, 20 points, 10 assists, 2 steals. DeAndre Jordan, 14 rebounds a game, 12 points, 2 blocks. They had J.J. Redick averaging 16 points. So a very deep roster. They were in contention. Apparently, I remember hearing Kevin was blown away by their presentation. So I remember the Clippers being in contention to get Kevin Durant. And if he would have went to that team. I see an all-out favorite right away. Of course, the biggest question with the Clippers is health. Can Blake Griffin and Chris Paul stay healthy the entirety of his stay there? Does Chris Paul end up staying there if Kevin goes there? So who knows? A lot of moving parts, but if he does go there, I do see a huge, overwhelming favorite in Los Angeles. Maybe the Clippers get their first championship ever. Who knows? Really cool hypothetical. And then another team, obviously, the Spurs, they had Kawhi averaging 21, 22 points, 7 rebounds, 2 steals, 1 block. They just got LaMarcus Aldridge, averaging 18 points, 8 rebounds, and they still had Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, and it was in about the last stunt of Tim Duncan's career. So they still had those guys together. It was on the tail end, obviously, but they still had some basketball left to play, coming off a championship a couple years prior. Like I said, they still had basketball left in them. That Spurs group did. And if they added a guy in the caliber of Kevin Durant, I think that San Antonio roster probably goes on to win another championship, another one for the Spurs dynasty. It propels, Popovich, Duncan, all of them get a championship. Kawhi, all of them get a championship. Kevin gets one. It propels him. He wins one with the Spurs and an all-time organization. That would have been a very cool hypothetical as well. Either way, I think the move to Golden State was the perfect move for Kevin Durant. It made all the sense in the world, basketball-wise and off-the-court-wise. We've seen what he did in Silicon Valley, all his investments, all the moves he's made since going to Golden State. So all the boxes were checked with Kevin going to Golden State. I think it was the right move. I think it propelled him as an all-time status, an all-time great player. I'm excited to see what he can do in Brooklyn. I hope he can come back 100%. He does have a different style of play in the point guard in Kyrie Irving than he did, with the point guard in Steph Curry. I think it's a little bit of a downgrade there. I prefer Steph to Kyrie, but still, I love KD, what he did to the Bay Area. He established himself as a Bay Area legend, and I think everyone is excited to see what he can do in Brooklyn, and similar to, LeBron to Miami, him to Golden State has got to be one of the biggest moves, if not the biggest move of the decade. You heard me weeks prior talking about my all-decade awards, and I did give the slight edge to LeBron to Miami because it, did give players the empowerment to move. And I don't necessarily think we see Kevin Durant going to Golden State if LeBron doesn't go to Miami. Either way, huge move for the league, solidified Golden State as an all-time great team, and people might have said they hated it, but the ratings said otherwise. While Kevin was on Golden State, the NBA saw some of the best ratings they had seen in a decade. So it was good for the NBA, no matter what people said. Yes, a huge controversial move, but I think Kevin made the right move. I just can't wait to see him back on the court. It's a little upsetting. I know he isn't back for the resumption of play in Orlando, but I 100% agree with his decision to sit out as well, not come back and play. Make sure that Achilles is 100%, because once that Achilles goes, you have to be even more careful about everything else. So props to him for being super careful with that injury. Either way, that's going to be it for today's episode of the GSMC Basketball Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, I urge you to leave a comment. Go follow us on any social media, in specific Facebook, on Twitter. I'm going to be putting a poll out on Twitter about if the NBA season deserves an asterisk or not. So go check that out. Go check out all our social media pages and continue to check out the Basketball Podcast through the entire week, with Bryce, Nick, and myself. Check out all of our content. We're giving you the best news possible in the world of the NBA, since that's kind of the, what's going on right now. But again, thanks so much for your support, and thanks so much for listening. I'll see you guys again on Thursday.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.